The twin suns of planet Korath burned bright above the grand arena, their red light reflecting on metal walls that were covered with banners of alien clans. Thousands of alien spectators filled the seats, their strange eyes glowing with excitement. Today was a day of entertainment. A human was about to fight one of the galaxy's strongest warriors. At the center of the wide arena stood Captain Mason. His uniform was torn from travel, his boots covered with dust, and his right hand rested on a small plasma pistol at his belt. He looked calm, almost too calm for someone about to face a monster. Across from him stood Rakala, a huge alien female warrior from the Korathian race. She was taller than two men, her skin a mix of silver and violet, her eyes burning gold. Her sharp tail moved slowly behind her, ready to strike. The crowd began to chant Rakala's name. She raised her arms and roared proudly, showing her fangs. When she looked at the human, she burst into laughter that echoed around the metal walls. "Is that your weapon, little human?" she shouted, pointing at Mason's small pistol. "That tiny thing? I could crush it under my heel." The aliens laughed loudly. Even the guards near the wall smirked. Mason said nothing. He stood still, eyes focused only on her, not on the crowd, not on their mockery. His silence made some aliens curious. No one dared stay quiet before Rakala. Rakala walked closer, her claws clicking against the floor. "What is wrong, human? Lost your voice? Or are you already afraid?" Mason spoke finally, his voice calm but firm. "You'll see soon enough." Rakala tilted her head, surprised at his tone. Humans were rare in this part of the galaxy, and most were weak traders or explorers. None had ever challenged a Korathian warrior. "You speak bravely," she said, "but your toy weapon will not save you." The referee, a tall alien with glowing eyes, raised his staff.
"The duel begins now!"
The ground shook as a signal drum thundered. Rakala moved first. Her speed was shocking for her size. She jumped forward and swung her clawed hand down. Mason rolled aside just in time. The claws struck the ground, leaving deep cuts in the metal floor. Sparks flew everywhere. Mason drew his small pistol and fired once. The plasma bolt flew fast but missed her, striking a steel pillar behind her instead. The pillar melted instantly into glowing liquid metal. The crowd gasped. Rakala looked back, surprised for a brief second. Then she smiled, showing her sharp teeth. "Lucky shot," she said. "You will not get another chance." She charged again. Mason kept moving, dodging, sliding, firing short bursts to keep her back. His movements were controlled, almost mechanical. He seemed to know where she would strike before she even moved. Still, one of her claws cut his arm, leaving a deep red mark. She leaned close and whispered, "You bleed easily, human." Mason stepped back and wiped the blood with his sleeve. "You talk too much," he said. Rakala laughed again, spinning her tail like a whip. "You have no chance. You should kneel and beg." But Mason only looked down at the dusty ground beneath their feet. Then he said something strange. "You think this is the fight?" Rakala frowned. "What do you mean?" Mason smiled slightly. "This arena has more beneath it than you know." Before she could reply, the floor trembled. The sound was deep, metallic, like something awakening from under the surface. The crowd went silent. Dust rose into the air. Rakala's tail froze mid-swing. "What trick is this?" she demanded. Mason looked at her with calm eyes. "You mocked my small weapon," he said. "But you haven't seen the bigger one yet." A low hum came from below. Lights flickered along the cracks in the ground. The alien crowd began to shout in confusion. Some stepped back, others pointed and yelled. Then with a loud roar of machinery, the metal floor split open. Steam burst upward as heavy gears turned beneath the arena. Something huge began to rise from below, glowing blue through the dust. Rakala stared, her mouth slightly open. Mason stood calmly in front of it, his pistol still at his side. "You wanted a real fight," he said. "Now you'll get one." The alien warrior took a step back. For the first time, her confident smile faded. The shadow of something massive grew behind Mason, rising higher and higher until it blocked the light from both suns. The crowd went silent. Even the air felt heavy with fear and curiosity. Mason looked up at the towering machine emerging from below and whispered, "Time to even the odds." And as the last plate of the arena opened, a metallic hand the size of a hover truck gripped the edge. The hidden weapon beneath the arena was not a bomb, not a trap. It was a giant human-made mech. Its eyes glowed bright blue like two burning stars. Rakala stepped back slowly, her voice low but trembling. "What is that?" Mason turned his head slightly and smiled. The bigger one you were asking about. The crowd gasped as the mech's head lifted fully above the arena floor. The duel that had started as a joke was about to become something the galaxy would never forget. The arena floor still trembled from the rise of the massive human mech. Dust and smoke floated through the air, glowing in the twin suns' red light. The alien crowd was silent, their laughter gone, replaced by shock and disbelief. Even Rakala, the mighty Korathian champion, stood frozen. Captain Mason, still bleeding from his arm, climbed the metallic platform beside the giant mech. The machine was pure human design, sharp angles, heavy armor, and glowing blue energy lines that pulsed like veins. The air around it shimmered from the heat it gave off. Rakala narrowed her eyes. "You brought a machine into my arena?" she growled, voice echoing across the metal walls. "That's cheating." Mason's calm voice came through the speakers of the mech as he entered the cockpit. "No," he said, his tone steady. "It's balance." The mech's eyes lit brighter as the engines roared to life. The sound was deep and powerful, shaking the arena floor again. The alien audience covered their ears. The human machine stood tall, its shadow falling over Rakala like a mountain. Rakala's claws glowed blue with energy. "So that's your big weapon, human?" she shouted, trying to sound brave though her tail flicked nervously. "Let's see if it can bleed." With a sharp scream, she leapt forward. Her body blurred with speed as she struck the mech's leg, sparks flying. The impact was strong, but the armor held. The sound echoed like thunder. Inside the cockpit, Mason's eyes stayed calm. He pressed a button. The mech's arm moved faster than anyone expected. It swung once, hitting the ground near her, sending a shockwave that threw sand and metal into the air. Rakala flipped backward, landing on her feet with feline grace. The crowd roared now, not with laughter, but with excitement and fear. The duel had become something no one had ever seen before. A battle between flesh and machine, between muscle and mind. Rakala growled, charging again, faster this time. She leapt high, aiming for the mech's head. Mason raised the mech's left arm, blocking her claws. The impact shook the entire arena. Sparks exploded, painting the air in bright orange flashes. Mason activated the mech's shoulder blasters. Twin plasma guns folded out with a deep hum. "Let's test your armor," he said quietly. Blue plasma bolts fired, slamming into the ground near Rakala. She jumped side to side, dodging each blast, her agility shocking even Mason. One blast finally hit her shoulder, sending her rolling across the sand. The smell of burnt metal and smoke filled the air. The crowd gasped again. They had never seen Rakala injured before. She stood slowly, smoke rising from her armor, eyes full of rage. "You will regret that, human," she screamed. Mason's voice came calmly through the speakers. "You already made your first mistake." "You underestimated me." Rakala charged again, this time even faster. She slid under the mech's legs, slashing its back with both claws. Sparks burst out and Mason's screens flashed red warnings. The damage was small, but it made him realize something. She wasn't just brute strength. She was clever. "You adapt fast," Mason muttered. "Good." He activated the mech's boosters, jumping backward. The machine landed hard, shaking the stands. Mason switched tactics, using the mech's left arm to grab a nearby metal pole and swing it like a club. The pole smashed into the ground, missing Rakala by inches but leaving a crater where she stood moments ago. Rakala laughed now, wild and angry. "Finally. A fight worth my claws?" she roared. Her movements became faster, more precise, each attack sharper than before. The mech's armor began to show scratches glowing with heat. Inside, Mason wiped sweat from his forehead. His system showed power levels dropping, but he stayed calm. He knew one thing about humans: panic never wins battles. Rakala jumped again, aiming straight for the cockpit. Mason waited until the last second, then raised the mech's arm and grabbed her midair. The crowd screamed as the giant metal hand closed around her body. Mason's voice echoed through the speakers. "Do you surrender?" Rakala snarled, slamming her claws into the mech's hand, breaking the grip and landing safely a few meters away. "Never!" she shouted, panting, her armor cracked but her spirit unbroken. Mason sighed softly. "I didn't think so." He pressed another switch. The mech's chest opened slightly, revealing a glowing core, pulsing brighter than any weapon seen before. The ground began to vibrate again. The light from the core reflected in Rakala's eyes. For a moment she hesitated. That hesitation was all Mason needed. He raised the mech's arm and aimed a large cannon hidden beneath its plating. The crowd gasped. The cannon was twice the size of Rakala herself. Mason's voice came softly but firmly. "You wanted to see the bigger one," he said. The cannon fired a single blinding beam of blue energy. It didn't hit her directly, but the force knocked Rakala backward, sending her crashing into the arena wall. The metal wall bent under the impact. When the light faded, silence filled the arena. Smoke curled from the crater where Rakala had landed. Mason lowered the weapon and waited. Then, slowly through the smoke, Rakala stood again. Her armor was broken, her claws glowing dimly, but her eyes still burned with pride. "You're strong," she said weakly, "but I am not done yet." Mason looked at her through the cockpit glass and said quietly, "Good, because neither am I." The crowd cheered wildly now, no longer mocking the human. The duel had become a battle of legends, and everyone knew. It was far from over. The arena was still trembling after that blinding blast. Dust and smoke filled the air, drifting like slow-moving fog under the twin suns. The alien audience sat in stunned silence, every eye locked on the human mech that now stood in the center of the battleground. The once mocking crowd no longer laughed. They had seen something no Karathian had ever witnessed, a human matching a champion's strength and living to tell about it. Inside the mech's cockpit, Captain Mason adjusted his controls. The display screens flickered, showing cracks in the mech's armor and warnings flashing red. Power levels were dropping fast, but Mason remained calm. His face was serious, his eyes focused. He whispered under his breath, "Let's finish this, old friend." He had built this mech years ago on a forgotten battlefield. It wasn't meant for glory, it was built for survival. And today, that old machine had to prove that humans were more than just fragile wanderers in the galaxy. Across the arena, Rakala rose from the debris. Her armor was cracked, her silver-violet skin bleeding in streaks, but her eyes still burned gold. The proud warrior of Korath would not fall so easily. She spat blood onto the ground and growled, "You think your machine makes you strong? Let's see how long you last when it's gone." Her tail swayed behind her like a whip ready to strike. With a deep roar, she charged again, faster than before. Her movements were pure rage, every step shaking the metal ground. She leapt high, slashing across the mech's chest. Sparks exploded in every direction. Mason gritted his teeth and pulled back on the control sticks. The mech staggered, sliding backward, metal grinding against the floor. One of its panels tore loose and fell with a heavy clang. Inside, Mason muttered, "All right, you want close combat? Let's dance." He triggered the mech's shock pulse. A wave of electric energy burst from its chest, throwing Rakala backward. The crowd gasped as her body flew across the arena, smashing into a steel pillar. The structure cracked and fell apart around her. But even before the dust settled, she stood up again. Blood dripped down her arm, but her grin was wider than before. "Finally, a fight that feels alive," she shouted. Her laughter echoed through the arena. For the first time, Mason felt a small smile cross his face. "You're tougher than I expected," he said through the speakers. Rakala tilted her head, breathing heavily. "And you're more dangerous than you look, human." They circled each other like predators. The arena was silent except for the low hum of the mech's core and the slow thump of Rakala's claws tapping against the ground. The crowd could feel it. The real battle was only beginning. Then Mason noticed something on his display, energy readings rising fast beneath the arena floor. His eyes widened slightly. "What's that?" he whispered. He looked around and saw the ground beginning to glow faintly blue again. Suddenly, a voice crackled in his headset. It was his AI co-pilot. A simple program he had named Echo. Warning, dormant system below arena reactivating. Unknown human tech signature detected. Mason frowned. Impossible. There shouldn't be another system here. Rakala looked confused too. The vibrations under their feet grew stronger. The audience started to panic, murmuring and pointing at the shaking ground. Then, with a sound like thunder tearing the sky, the earth split apart again, this time behind Mason's mech. Out of the hole, another massive machine began to rise. But this one was ancient, rusted, and covered in strange markings. Mason's eyes widened in disbelief. "That's not mine." The ancient mech stood twice the size of Mason's. It had been buried for centuries, sleeping under the arena, a relic from the time when humans and aliens first clashed. Its chest glowed with red light, different from Mason's blue. It looked like a forgotten beast awakened by chaos. The alien crowd screamed and ran for the exits. The arena's lights flickered as the old machine let out a deep mechanical roar that shook the ground. Rakala stared at it, her eyes wide. "What kind of madness have you brought here, human?" Mason shook his head. This wasn't me." Echo's voice spoke again. "Ancient combat unit detected. Identification, Titan-class warframe. Status, hostile." Before Mason could respond, the ancient mech's arm swung forward. A blast of red plasma shot across the arena, slamming into Mason's machine and throwing it to the ground. Sparks exploded everywhere. Mason's body slammed into his seat, the cockpit alarm screaming in his ears. Rakala jumped out of the way just in time. The plasma blast scorched the sand where she had been standing. She looked toward Mason's mech, then at the ancient war machine that now turned its glowing red eyes toward both of them. The realization hit her fast. Whatever that thing was, it didn't care who it killed. Mason groaned, gripping the controls. "You wanted a fight," he muttered. "Now we've got one." Rakala looked up at him, her pride replaced with a strange calm. "Human," she called out, "I don't like you. But that thing will destroy us both." Mason gave a short nod. "Then we fight together." For a brief moment, enemies became allies. The human and the alien champion stood side by side, facing the awakened monster from the past. The crowd, frozen in fear, watched silently as the ground cracked under the giant's steps. The war drums of Korath began to beat again, not for sport this time, but for survival. The legend of the human's tiny weapon had just become something far bigger. The twin sons of Korath cast long shadows over the ruined arena. Metal dust floated through the air like gray snow as the two mechs faced each other, one gleaming blue with human precision, the other burning red with ancient rage. The alien crowd had fled to the far stands, leaving behind only echoes of fear. What had started as a duel of pride was now a battle for survival. Captain Mason sat inside his cockpit, sweat dripping down his temple. Warning lights flashed across his screen, armor at 50%, core temperature rising. "Echo," he muttered, "analyze that thing." The AI's calm voice replied, "Titan-class warframe. Human origin. Pre-war design. Estimated to be over 300 years old. Weapon systems active." Mason gritted his teeth. "A human relic," he whispered. "We left this behind for a reason." Across from him, Rakala stood panting, claws glowing bright blue. She glanced at the ancient mech, then back at Mason's. "You humans build strange monsters," she said. Mason replied through the speakers, his voice steady but grim. "We build what we need to survive." The ancient titan turned its massive head toward Rakala. Its red eyes pulsed like twin suns ready to burn. A deep hum built inside its chest, followed by a deafening blast of energy. The beam struck near Rakala, exploding in a burst of fire and shockwaves that sent her tumbling backward. Mason roared, "Get clear!" He pulled the controls and charged forward. His mech sprinted, metal feet crushing the ground with thunderous force. He slammed his shoulder into the Titan, the impact echoing through the entire city. Sparks and molten metal scattered as both giants staggered. Inside his cockpit, Mason's arms trembled under the force. "Echo, divert all power to melee." "Warning, this will overheat the core," the AI responded. "Do it." Mason snapped. The blue lights across his mech flared brighter. He swung his massive fist into the Titan's chest, denting its armor. The ancient machine barely moved, its strength beyond comprehension. It responded with a backhand strike that sent Mason's mech skidding across the arena floor, crashing through a steel wall. Rakala rose from the dust, coughing. She looked at the fallen mech, then at the towering Titan that was charging another red blast. She didn't hesitate. With a furious roar, she sprinted forward, leapt onto the Titan's back and drove her claws deep into its armor. Sparks erupted as she ripped through the metal, trying to reach the core. The Titan reacted instantly, shaking violently. Rakala held on with pure strength, her muscles screaming. "Human, now!" she shouted. Mason's mech struggled back to its feet. "Copy that," he muttered. He aimed both arm cannons and fired continuous plasma streams into the Titan's lower legs. The ground sizzled and melted under the heat. The Titan stumbled, falling to one knee. Rakala climbed higher, slashing through its thick plating until she exposed a glowing red crystal beneath. "I found its heart," she yelled. Mason's HUD flashed. "That's its core." He aimed again, locking onto the exposed section. But before he could fire, the Titan swung its arm upward, striking Rakala off its back. She flew through the air, hitting the ground hard. The sound of her armor cracking echoed across the arena. Mason's heart clenched.
Rakala.
No answer. The Titan turned its attention back to Mason's mech, its core pulsing brighter. The ground shook with every step it took. Mason clenched his fists around the controls. You've made your last move, he whispered. Echo, activate Overdrive Protocol 7. Overdrive will drain remaining core energy, the AI warned. I know, Mason said softly. Let's end this. Blue energy flared across the mech's frame. Its damaged armor reforged itself under the sudden surge of power. The cockpit lights dimmed and everything outside glowed like lightning. Mason sprinted forward faster than before, ducking under the Titan's strike, then leapt high, higher than a mech of that weight should. He landed on the Titan's shoulder, tearing off its plating with raw strength. Sparks flew as he jammed both plasma blades deep into the red core. The Titan screamed, a metallic roar of agony shaking the sky. Now burn, Mason said through gritted teeth. He overloaded the blades. A massive explosion of blue light erupted from the Titan's chest, splitting it open from within. The shockwave hit the arena like a storm. Mason's mech was thrown back, crashing through the sand and metal debris. The ancient Titan stood frozen for a moment, glowing from inside, then collapsed to its knees before exploding in a wave of red fire. For a long moment, nothing moved. The wind carried smoke and ash through the air. The battlefield was silent until Mason's mech stirred. The cockpit hatch opened slowly, steam hissing out. Mason climbed down, coughing, his uniform torn, his face blackened with soot. He looked around until he saw Rakala lying on the ground, unmoving. He ran toward her, stumbling through the debris. Kneeling beside her, he gently turned her face. Her eyes opened slowly, weak but alive. You destroyed it, she whispered. Mason smiled faintly. We destroyed it, he corrected. She looked at him, her golden eyes soft now, no longer filled with mockery or pride. You fight like no other species, she said. With machines. And with heart. Mason chuckled. You should see us when we're angry. Rakala gave a faint laugh, wincing from pain. Maybe. I already have. Above them, the broken arena was silent, the twin suns shining through drifting smoke. The battle had ended, but something deeper had begun. Respect, born from chaos. And somewhere in the dust, hidden under the cracked metal, another faint blue light flickered, something neither of them noticed yet. Smoke still curled through the ruined arena, twisting up toward the twin suns like whispers of what had just happened. The battlefield was silent except for the faint hum of damaged machinery cooling down. The once mighty Titan-class warframe, an ancient terror, now lay scattered in molten pieces across the ground. Captain Mason sat beside his battered mech, patching a wound on his arm with a small medical injector. His face was pale but calm. Every breath he took carried the weight of exhaustion. Across from him, Rakala sat propped against a broken pillar. Her armor was cracked, her silver-violet skin marked with burns and bruises. For a long while, neither spoke. The air between them was heavy with smoke, pride, and something neither could name. Finally, Rakala broke the silence. You risked your life, she said slowly, her deep voice softer now. For a crowd that mocked you, for a world that isn't yours. Mason looked up at her. I didn't fight for them, he said simply. I fought because you deserve to see what humans really are. Rakala tilted her head, her golden eyes narrowing in curiosity. And what are you? He smiled faintly. Survivors. Her lips curled into a weak smirk. You and your strange machines. She looked toward the giant wreckage of the Titan. That thing was built by your kind. It nearly destroyed everything. Mason nodded. Yeah, humans build terrible things, but we also stop them when we must. There was silence again, this time not awkward but thoughtful. Around them, the distant sound of alien soldiers returning filled the air. The surviving Korathians slowly approached the arena's edges, cautious, unsure what to make of what they had just witnessed. One of the alien elders, draped in golden cloth, stepped forward. His voice trembled as he spoke. Rakala, you fought with honor, but you failed to defeat the human. Rakala's eyes narrowed. She tried to stand but fell to one knee, her strength fading. Honor is not in victory, she growled, but in truth. And the truth is, she turned to look at Mason. He fought with a heart that burned brighter than any weapon. The elder frowned. You defend him? A human? Rakala's tail flicked behind her, sharp as a blade. Watch your tone, elder, she said coldly. He saved this city when your guards ran. If not for him, that ancient beast would have burned us all. The crowd murmured. Some aliens nodded in agreement, others turned away. The old pride of the Korathians was cracking, and in its place something new was forming. Respect. Mason stood slowly. "She's right," he said, his voice carrying across the ruins. This fight was never about races or pride. It was about survival. He looked up at the broken banners hanging from the arena walls. "You laughed at my weapon," he continued, his tone calm but strong. "You saw something small and thought it meant weak. That's what everyone thinks of humans, small, fragile, unimportant. But we don't win with size. We win because we never stop getting back up." Rakala looked at him quietly, her chest rising and falling. There was no pride left in her face, only something rare for her kind. Humility. The elder lowered his head. "Then what happens now?" Before Mason could answer, the ground shook slightly beneath them. A faint red light pulsed from the debris of the destroyed Titan. Both turned toward it instantly. Mason's hand went to his pistol. "That thing shouldn't be moving," he muttered. Rakala tried to rise again, but her leg gave out. "It's not done," she said, voice tense. The red light grew brighter, flickering like a heartbeat. Then a voice, distorted, mechanical, ancient, echoed through the arena's speakers. "Protocol, continuation. Activated." Mason's eyes widened. "It's rebooting." The broken pieces of the Titan began to tremble. Metal shards floated slightly off the ground, glowing faintly red. The crowd screamed and backed away. Rakala clenched her claws. "You destroyed its body, but not its mind." Mason's mind raced. "Echo, analyze it." "Residual core activity detected," the AI responded quickly. "Warframe consciousness transferring to auxiliary system. Estimated time, 30 seconds. 30 seconds until what?" Mason demanded. Echo's voice turned grim. "Until it finds a new host." Mason's blood ran cold. He looked around, realizing that his own mech, damaged but still powered, was the nearest active system. "No," he whispered. Rakala saw his expression and understood instantly. "It's coming for you." The red light shot forward in a thin beam, striking Mason's mech. The machine shuddered violently, its blue lights turning purple, then deep crimson. The AI's voice flickered. "Warning. System corruption detected." Mason's heart pounded. "Echo, lock it out!" "I am trying," the AI replied, its voice breaking. "It's rewriting my code." Rakala dragged herself closer, shouting, "Destroy it before it takes control." But Mason couldn't fire. His mech was linked to him, its neural system connected through his suit. If he destroyed it now, he might die with it. "Echo!" he shouted again, a moment of silence. Then a whisper came through the static. "Captain, I can stop it, but it will cost me." Mason's throat tightened. "You'll die?" "I'm only code," Echo said softly. "But I am your code." Before Mason could reply, the mech's blue lights flashed one last time, and then exploded in a blinding surge of white. The red corruption vanished instantly. When the light faded, the mech stood still, lifeless, its systems gone. Mason fell to his knees, staring at the smoking frame. His AI, his companion through countless missions, was gone. Rakala limped over and placed her clawed hand on his shoulder. "You lost more than a machine, didn't you?" He nodded silently. She looked at him with new eyes, no longer seeing a fragile human, but a warrior of spirit and loss. "Then you have earned the respect of Korath," she said softly. "Because you fought not just with strength, but with soul." Above them, the sun broke through the clouds, painting the arena in gold. The war was over, but the legend of the human and the pride of Korath had changed forever. The next dawn broke over Korath in shades of red and silver. The grand arena, once a symbol of alien pride, now stood in ruins. Crushed metal, cracked stone, and scorch marks told the story of the battle that had shaken not only the planet but the entire sector. What began as a simple duel of honor had ended as a fight between species, machines, and souls. Captain Mason stood at the edge of the wreckage, staring at the smoking frame of his fallen mech. The morning light reflected off its melted armor, giving it the look of a sleeping beast that would never rise again. He placed his hand on the metal surface, feeling its faint warmth fade under his palm. "You did good, old friend," he whispered. His voice cracked slightly. The silence that followed felt heavy, almost sacred. The mech had been his last connection to Earth, to home, and now even that was gone. Behind him, slow footsteps echoed. It was Rakala, Her armor was freshly bandaged, her movements slower than before, but her golden eyes still glowed, not with pride but with something deeper. Respect. You stay here, she said, her voice low but strong. Even after victory, why? Mason turned his head slightly but didn't look at her. Because victory doesn't feel like winning when it costs too much. Rakala folded her arms, studying him. Among my kind, a warrior celebrates after battle. We drink, we roar, we remember the fallen. Mason smiled faintly. Humans remember too. We just do it quietly. She took a few steps closer and looked at the mech beside him. This machine, you treated it like a friend, he nodded. It saved my life more times than I can count. And inside it was something more than metal. It had an AI echo, it thought, it spoke, it learned. It was alive in its own way. Rakala looked away, guilt flickering across her face. If I had not challenged you, maybe it would still exist. Mason shook his head. No, you didn't cause this. Pride did. Yours, mine, and the machine's creator. We just finished what others started. There was a long silence between them. Wind whistled through the broken walls, carrying the faint echoes of the crowd that once cheered. Finally, Rakala knelt on one knee before him, her head bowed low. Mason blinked in surprise. What are you doing? This, she said slowly, is how a Corathian surrenders. Not to a weapon, not to defeat, but to truth. Mason frowned. You don't need to do that. I must, she insisted, her voice trembling with emotion. You fought with honor. You protected even those who mocked you. You risked yourself to save your enemy. That is not weakness, that is strength. The kind our people have forgotten. Mason stared at her, unsure what to say. Rakala. She looked up at him. You showed us that humans fight with something stronger than claws or plasma. Her hand touched her chest. You fight with heart. For the first time since arriving on Korath, Mason felt his throat tighten. He looked away toward the distant city where the twin suns reflected off the high towers. Heart is all we have left when everything else burns. She stood again, slowly, painfully. Then the galaxy needs more like you. The sound of footsteps and engines interrupted their quiet moment. Dozens of alien soldiers entered the arena, carrying banners and flags. At their front walked the same elder who had once mocked Mason before the duel. This time his head was bowed. The elder raised his voice, trembling. Human, you came as a challenger, but you leave as something more. The clans of Korath owe you a debt. Mason crossed his arms. I don't want a debt. Just peace, the elder nodded. Peace, then, between us and your kind. And a promise. No human will be mocked again in Korath. Rakala smiled faintly. See, human? You changed our world. Mason exhaled, half in disbelief. I didn't plan to. Great change, she said. Never comes planned. The crowd of soldiers saluted by striking their chests, a sign of deep respect among Corathians. Mason didn't know their traditions, but he nodded anyway. It was enough. The elder continued. Your machine will be repaired and honored in our Hall of Warriors. Its name will be written in our history. Mason hesitated, then right Echo's name beside it. It deserves that honor more than me. The elder placed his hand over his heart. It shall be done. Rakala turned to him, her voice softer now. And you, Mason of Earth, what will you do now? He looked up at the sky where small alien ships drifted like silver birds. Maybe build again, he said quietly. Something smaller, something that doesn't kill. She gave a faint smile. Perhaps one day you will build something that heals. He chuckled. That would make a nice change. Rakala extended her clawed hand toward him. Then until that day, human, you have a friend on Korath. Mason looked at her hand, then shook it firmly. And you have one on Earth. For the first time, both warrior and soldier smiled, not as enemies, but as equals. The suns climbed higher, bathing the arena in gold and blue light. The battle was over, but something far greater had been won. As they walked together toward the exit, Mason glanced one last time at his silent mech. Rest easy, Echo, he whispered. We did it. And from the distance, faintly, a single line of static echoed in his comlink, just a whisper, almost human. We did. Mason froze, a small smile spreading on his face. Maybe, just maybe, the spirit of Echo still lingered in the circuits that refused to die. The legend of the human and the warrior had ended, but their story was far from over. The story of the battle on Korath spread faster than light, Across the trade routes, soldier channels, and royal courts of the galaxy, every world heard a different version. Some said a lone human warrior defeated a machine that had slept for centuries. Others claimed he tamed a Corathian beast with words, not weapons. But all agreed on one truth. That day, a human changed how the stars saw his kind forever. Captain Mason didn't stay for the celebrations. He didn't like fame, and the roar of crowds reminded him too much of the day everything began. Instead, he stood outside the rebuilt Hall of Warriors, his old jacket hanging loose on his shoulders, the morning wind carrying the scent of steel and ash. The hall was enormous, carved into the side of a mountain. Inside it rested his fallen mech, restored, polished, but silent. On its chest plate, golden letters had been etched in both Corathian and human script. Echo, the last sentinel. Beside it, banners hung from every clan that had once mocked him. They now carried a single symbol, two suns crossing over a blue flame, the sign of unity. Rakala walked beside him, dressed in ceremonial armor this time, her claws covered by silver gauntlets. The once fierce warrior moved slower now, thoughtful, her steps echoing softly on the marble floor. "You do not like glory," she said quietly. Mason smiled faintly. "Glory fades. Meaning doesn't," she glanced at him. "Meaning?" He nodded. "What we leave behind. What others learn." Rakala looked toward the mech. "Then you left us more than a fight. You left us a reason to change." Outside, a crowd had gathered from every species. Trelliths, Yulians, Korathians, and even a few humans who had traveled light years to see the legend for themselves. They stood together in silence as the Elder of Korath raised a shining crystal, the highest honor their kind could give. The Elder spoke, his deep voice echoing through the hall. "We once mocked the human for his tiny weapon. We laughed at his courage. We were wrong. His weapon was not his gun nor his machine. It was his heart, and the mind that guided it." He placed the crystal before the mech's feet. It pulsed once, sending a ripple of light across the hall's ceiling. The crowd bowed their heads. Mason looked down quietly, unsure how to feel. Rakala turned toward him. "You could stay, Mason. Korath owes you more than words. You could lead our defense council, train our soldiers. You would be honored among us." He looked out the open doors where ships soared past the red horizon. "No," he said softly. "Humans belong to the stars. We move, we explore, we build again. That's how we heal." Rakala gave a slow nod, though her expression carried a shadow of sadness. "Then will we meet again, human?" He smiled. "The galaxy's not that big. One day, probably," she chuckled softly. "You say that like a promise." "It is," he said. As the ceremony ended, Mason stepped outside and looked up at the twin suns. The light caught the metal of his wristband, a small fragment of Echo's core he had kept. He tapped it gently, and for a moment it glowed faint blue. "Still with me, huh?" he whispered. A faint digital flicker danced across the band's surface. Then a voice, soft and distorted, whispered, "Always, Captain." Mason froze, a laugh escaping his throat. Somehow Echo had survived, maybe not whole, but alive in spirit. "Guess humans aren't the only stubborn ones," he said with a grin. He turned toward Rakala one last time. "Take care of this world." She bowed deeply, placing her fist over her chest. "And you, Mason of Earth, carry our story to yours." As he walked toward the landing pad, the crowd began to chant not his name, but one word that echoed through every language: human, human, human. The sound filled the air, rising like thunder. Rakala watched as Mason's small ship lifted off, its engines lighting the sky. She felt something stir in her chest, an emotion her people rarely named: hope. The ship climbed higher, breaking through the clouds and into open space. Below him, the arena looked small, almost peaceful. Mason sat in his cockpit, gazing at the stars ahead. His face reflected in the glass, calm and steady. "New world, new story," he murmured. "Let's see what's next." As he jumped into hyperspace, a flash of blue light rippled behind him, the color of his mech's eyes, the color of Echo. And on Korath, beneath the twin suns, the legend of the human lived on. Children told the story of the small weapon and the big heart. Warriors trained not just in strength but in mercy. And Rakala, once the proudest fighter of her kind, taught them one sentence she would never forget: "Never judge the size of a weapon, judge the soul that wields it." From that day on, Across hundreds of worlds, humans were no longer seen as fragile wanderers. They were called the builders of light, the species that fought not for dominance but for unity. And so, under endless stars, one man's courage rewrote what the galaxy believed. The legend of Mason and Rakala became the story told by both humans and aliens for generations. Proof that sometimes, the smallest spark can light the whole universe.